Questions? Oh my God, there's got to be some questions. No? Yes, I'm sorry. Michael, you first. Michael Perry, he's going to be one of our speakers a little later, actually the next panel. Michael Perry's from, he lives in Palo Alto, but his venture capital firm is in San Francisco. Michael Perry, welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Paul, just wanted to ask, a very interesting technology that you presented and has fantastic potential. Regarding the ultrasound treatment, how many treatments does an individual have to undergo generally?
Right.
And is there any scarring down of the prostate causing issues with urethral distribution?
And I can speak more in detail with you afterwards. In terms of number of treatments, we plan, kind of frame it better. The FDA typically will and has historically only given regulatory approval for the treatment of the whole prostate. So we are planning to engage the FDA in that manner. Now, I think what you may be alluding to, and I mentioned it in what was mentioned in the video, is focal therapy. So instead of treating the whole prostate, you have the ability to treat a subvolume of the prostate. While regulatory approval won't allow that to occur, there are lots of European and South American and Japanese clinical pieces of work being done, research studies really, as opposed to approval studies to do focal therapy. But because, coming back to my recommendation of you all taking PSA, because PSA is the only quantitative measure of success and efficacy, no one really knows what the outcome will be if you do a subvolume of the prostate. What will happen to your PSA? So people don't know. So we're pleased to say that we can address the absolute needs of the regulatory authorities and the historical way of treating prostates now, but we will also not be disintermediated in the future because we'll be able to do focal therapies as well. With respect to treating the prostate and any particular damage, you saw the temperature maps there. Now, the maximum temperature anywhere within the prostate was what those maps were for. And we don't go, our target boundary is 56 degrees C, which, as you all know, creates cell death immediately. We can control the maximum temperature internally. We can keep it as low as 70 or go up to 90. In the example we showed you, we were closer to 90 degrees because we want to keep it under 30 minutes for the treatment. What we do know about that is that there is no charring and no, sorry, this is a bit gruesome, but as I say, it's close to that. There's no charring or burning of the flesh that may cause obstructions in the urethra afterwards, which does happen with other high-energy technologies.
Any other questions? Gentlemen, please. Oh, I'm sorry. You first, and then you. I'm sorry. He's got the mic.
Hi, my name is Victor, and I'm working in a startup in the chemical industry. And I'm interested in your story, I'm talking to Paul, in your story about licensing technology from Sunnybrook. How did that process go? What is important to take? What was the key point for you to be able to license a technology and create a relationship with the Sunnybrook Hospital?
Good question. I think, and there's a panel on Office of Technology Transfer this afternoon. So I think that may be well addressed then. But typically, there needs to be an appreciation that the intellectual property that is coming out of that institution is relatively unencumbered, can come at market rates or commercial rates that make sense to every participant, and that there is a freedom to operate and develop the company in a particular area to everyone's satisfaction. So it's a partnership, really. You try and understand the technological basis of what's coming out of the institution, and then see if you can work on a commercial arrangement that makes sense to everybody.
Just a question for Peter for DB Health. The question I was wondering about is that historically the systems are very much closed, the data systems, right? And for example, in Canada, Meditech kind of owns the space. How does one go about defining what the area is that you're able to retrieve data from, and how do you get around the issue of all these closed systems allowing access to them? Because it's historically it's been tight as a drum.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Great question.
That was part of the, I think, from my perspective, when I went to Israel to see this the first time 5 years ago, that was part of the, I think, the innovation there, in the sense that we try and live with what it is human intensive to do this. So that's the kind of the hard part of this whole process of integrating all these computer systems. It's not like a bank where you can just hook up and everything runs perfectly. It's very human intensive. So we have to go into a Meditech site. We have to meet with and understand how they structure their data, what they call things. I mean, one of the biggest problems in healthcare is terminology. And what you don't want to do with this type of technology is present to the clinician 33 different allergies that all say penicillin, but have 33 different names, because you're overloading the clinician from that particular standpoint. And that can happen when Meditech calls it one thing and Cerner calls it another, and somebody else calls it. So unfortunately, it's a human-intensive type of effort to just sit down, understand how Meditech works in that particular situation, and then do the translating from that particular standpoint.
Thank you very much. My question is, my
Where are you
name is
from?
Natasha Polanova with the Board of Trade.
Yeah.
My question is for Peter and Ram. And I'm wondering, in terms of the success of your companies, what is the role of seed capital? Like, how did it contribute to the success of your companies? And my second question is also, what are some of the lessons for Toronto-based entrepreneurs? Here, thank you.
Each of you, let's just start left to right. Everybody's got the same problem or the same different answer. Let's start with you, Peter.
Well, the dbMotion actually was lucky in the sense that there was a company servicing Clalit and providing that information, and really the seed money, if you will, came from Clalit. So they said, we need this system, and we have to do something. We can spend $5 billion on a big centralized system, or we can spend less than $3 million on a dbMotion-like system and get some of the same economy. So from our perspective, the seed money came actually from Clalit. I think from, and that's at least from a lot of my experience, and maybe Sunnybrook would be the same way, that really was the idea, and the funding for that came from that perspective. I think from the lessons learned, it's be patient. Mm-hmm. It's especially in healthcare. Healthcare is one of the most conservative, rightfully so, organizations that you have to deal with. So change is difficult. I know one example of how long it took the British Navy to institute lime juice to treat scurvy was something like 3,000 years. Hopefully our technology is, not 3,000, 300 years. Hopefully our technology is getting better, but you have to be patient in the healthcare field.
It didn't take the British Navy.
Seed capital.
It didn't take the British Navy that long to take up the rum, though, did it? It was a hell of a lot easier. Seed capital. Right now, we're lucky that MaRS Innovation exists, and that there is a clearinghouse and a prioritization mechanism and capital to help companies get going. Profound was just before that.
Repeat the questions.
And
There's too many questions. I'll be right back.
I think to our existence, I would agree that patience is needed, but also merciless and voracious pursuit of all avenues of capital possible. Be patient, expect lots of no's, and then just keep going anyway.
Next question.
Actually, I would like to say something here.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at seed money today maybe a little bit differently, not as just money. You want to look at it as who is providing you the money, or in other words, what is the expertise behind it? Because you really want to, the people who put money into it to also contribute something with knowledge and understanding of the market. And this is where it comes to your question about the Toronto market, particularly, that ideas, you can find many ideas every day. And the point is, what is the particular value that the Toronto market would have relative to Israel, for example, right? And in my opinion, right now, the value is the proximity to the larger market in the US, right? And the culture cultural proximity as well as the temporal proximity, that you don't need to be across the Atlantic. And that's a great value that Toronto can look at and promote.
Rami, you have to move to Toronto. You cannot give us advice from Boston.
All right.
I don't know what the order was, but maybe...
My name is Greg Wong, and some of these gentlemen, the entrepreneurial passion is really fantastic. But the picture that you painted was largely a no-brainer, green, go-ahead type of picture. What are in fact, the top 3 obstacles or issues or challenges holding you back from this thing? Maybe there's more than 3, maybe there's none, but basically, what are the top 3 issues that you face in holding you back or undermining the ability to succeed?
Dollars, pounds, euros.
In that order?
No, I'll take them in any order.
You are softening, Paul. What's happening to you?
No,
Yeah, and probably the last, right behind you. Go ahead.
Good morning, Adam Moskovich. Up till recently, I was founder and medical director of the Canadian Sleep Institute. Looking at the device that you developed, Ram, and about 20 years ago at Stanford, we are experimenting actually with a pressure-sensitive airbed in diagnosing snoring, leg kicks, and sleep apnea. My question is, what stops you from using your kind of a device actually as a diagnostic tool for some of those conditions, which is a huge market? Okay. The next question that is related to that, what's different about your technology and some of the technologies that at least has been preliminarily developed by Nexsense, which is another Israeli company?
Yeah. First question is, or the answer to the first question is that pretty much the sky is the limit. It's a question of resources that you have. If we look at the technology or what we want to do with the patient, right, the ideal picture for patient monitoring would be to measure all the vital signs of the patient. Take it, add to the respiratory and heart rate and motion, you can add temperature, you can add blood pressure, you can add oxygen saturation in the blood and so on. So ideally, we will at some point in time create an environment that will monitor the patient and provide most of the relevant vital signs. It's a question of resources, and once you have the technology or the idea of the technology, you can take it in many different directions, some of them as you described. Relative to the second question, the expertise that Edison's created and developed is the ability to take a very complicated signal, which is a combination of heart rate, respiratory rate, and emotion, right? And be able to magically or not magically, it's not magically, it's obviously algorithms, to distinguish between the heart rate, respiratory rate, and motion quite distinctively and reliably. So if you look, for example, at the number of false alarms, it's very, very, very low. We're talking about less than half false alarm per shift per nurse. So it's very, very low relative to other standards in the industry. So the expertise, I would say, is in the algorithms and the ability to take all the information that goes into the sensor and translate it into distinctive values.